Welcome to Positive Disintegration, a path to authenticity. This is a special episode because it's a recording of a workshop which Chris and I ran for the Dabrowski Congress 2024. The workshop is called Walking Your Talk, Defining Your Values. So grab a pen or your keyboard and feel free to do the workshop along with us. I'd like to thank all the participants for their input, which made the workshop even more valuable. The format's going to be a little different, and there'll be a few pauses along the way for you to write down your answers and thoughts to some of the prompting questions, and we'll put the slides from the workshop in the show notes. And as always, I hope you do get a whole lot out of this episode. Welcome to our workshop, everybody. Obviously, this is going to be an online affair, and thank you all very much for joining us. I'm Emma Nicholson.
I'm Chris Wells. But glad to be here. Thank you so much for joining us. We've had a kind of a long day, so thanks for tuning in.
The first part, we're going to just set the scene. So we're going to talk about values, why values are important, what they are, and how they shift. And then we're going to go into the workshop portion. So we're going to do some exercises around discovering our drivers and defining our values and working towards activating behavioral change. So the goal here is to obviously help you understand values and what they are and how they work, start to discover your personality ideal, and then use this journey to start your own path towards your authenticity and your own autopsychotherapy exercises. So for this, you will need something to take notes on. So whether that is a paper pen or you've got your keyboard at the ready with notes, you will want to jot some things down.
So the place of values in the theory of positive disintegration. Values is an incredibly important part of the theory, and I'm not sure if that's common knowledge to everybody, but it's true. There's one place outside of the Chainin books that I've mentioned that Dabrowski wrote with a pseudonym. There's one place where he actually talked about his own experiences in his own words. And these quotes that I've chosen for this slide come from this foreword from 1975 of a monograph that Michael Piechowski wrote. And in this foreword, he talks about his own experiences of overexcitabilities. But when you read it, one thing comes through. He uses the word values so many times. And as you can see, he described in his adolescence and youth having a distinct need to see values in hierarchical order. And then the juxtaposition of inhuman forces and inhuman humans with those who were sensitive, capable of sacrifice, courageous, gave a vivid panorama of a scale of values from the lowest to the highest. And then, here again appeared the problem of multi-levelness of social groups and of multi-levelness of social values. The distinction of levels, their organization and development became, for me, the key to answers I sought. So values are really at the heart of the difference between unilevel and multi-level disintegrations, but we'll get into that later. So this quote comes from an interview that Dabrowski did in 1979 called The Heroism of Sensitivity, which is amazing. And this quote comes from it, and to me, it beautifully captures the place of values in TPD. Creating new values is a fundamental part of development. When we grow, we start to have a different view of reality, and that leads us to reorder our value system. We create values by our self-observation, by our thinking, and by putting our ideals into practice. Discovering in ourselves higher levels of development, higher tendencies and sensitivities, we simultaneously create them. I think that this is such a powerful quote. So that leads us to, why are we doing this workshop? Why does this matter? Well, this is from Positive Disintegration. Realization of the complexities of both the internal and the external environment and of one's own hierarchy of values enables one to reach a higher level of integration through autopsychotherapy, not merely to return to the previous state. And this, I feel like we saw this today in sessions at the Congress, descriptions of lived experiences saying, that that this self-discovery led them to, the growth that brought them to us today to talk about it. And so our values can lead to our autopsychotherapy. I mean, my gosh, Mike and Tosh just totally gave us, this example. It leads to growth.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of like the starting point, because if your autopsychotherapy is like a path or a journey, you've got to have almost like an inner compass to sort of point you about where that journey is going to go. So let's talk a little bit about what values are, because I think for a lot of us, they're sort of very unconscious or subconscious, and we don't really give them a lot of direct thought all the time. So values, our principles or standards that we want for our behavior, and those are driven by what we see as important in life. So I'm going to break this definition down a little bit, and then we'll continue to look at the components of this, because I think it's quite helpful for understanding. So when we're talking about our values, though, there's two things to bear in mind. The first thing is it's all about relationships. So if you think about behaviors, they're out in the world. You're not in a vacuum. Unless, like, if you were the last person on earth, how you behaved, it wouldn't matter at all, right? But values are about how we're behaving in our interpersonal relationships. So it encompasses everything, about how we think and feel and act towards others and ourselves. And the second thing to note is that they can come from internal sources, so within us, or external sources. If you think about it, we actually learn a lot of values from observing other people's behavior. We see what we do and we don't want to replicate. And so that's also an important thing to remember about values, is they can come from within us, but we can get them from other sources. So I'm going to break down that definition of values now a little bit further in a visualization I like to call the value stack. So if values are standards, right, and they inform our behaviors, you can see behaviors at the top coming from the values, they're also driven by what we see as important in life. So the important things to us at the bottom of the stack are our beliefs, so everything we feel and know about the world, and our priorities. So out of those things that are in our life, what are the most important? And that's all happening internally. And then our values almost take what's in our inner world and operationalize it out into the external world. So informing how, again, we're going to interact with other people. And all of that, when you think about it, really informs our identity, because everything we think, feel, believe, what we think is important, how we want to act, all gives us a sense of self. So when we get to that disintegration moment, you can understand how that can all start falling apart. So I just want to look at those components individually. So when we talk about beliefs at the very bottom of the stack, we're talking about everything we know, think, and feel about the world, about ourselves, and about others, right? It's basically our experience of being a human in the world. So our beliefs, again, are everything that we know. And if you, take, for example, a roller coaster, you and I could go on the same roller coaster at exactly the same time, right? It's the same experience. However, how we think and feel about that might be vastly different. So I might think it's the best thing in the world, and you might find it terrifying. So people can go through the same experiences and have vastly different outcomes, like Dabrowski witnessed when he was going through wartime and wondered how people got different outcomes from the same experience. And then when we talk about our priorities, these are all the things, ideas, and people that we feel are important. So it's a qualitative understanding of our different experiences and comparing them to each other. So with the roller coaster, if I think it's awesome, it might suddenly become very important to me, and I might want to go on it again and again, but it might not be important to you, and you don't want to ever see it another day in your life. And then we have our values. So that's those principles and standards that we want to live our life by. And, me enjoying the roller coaster, I might discover I've got a need for speed and I like taking risks and I want to seize opportunities when they come. And that's going to inform how I live my life. You might decide that you take a more risk adverse approach, and that could translate through to everything from your relationships to your banking transactions. So, as you can see, what we experience in the world and how we perceive that then informs how we want to be as a human. And then at the top, we have our behaviors. So that's all the things we do, say, think, mostly out in the world.
Yeah, these are just some examples of where values can come from externally or, from our experiences. This is an interesting thing because, I mean, it's so different for all of us. And just kind of reflecting on discussions that we saw today, I mean, how we are mirrored when we're young and received by the people in our life, our parents, has such a huge impact on how we experience the world and how, you know, our values develop. If they even do in the sense of a hierarchy. I mean, the best way to understand the difference between unilevel and multi-level is the presence of or lack thereof a hierarchy of values. And so, I mean, that's reflective of there not being like a higher versus lower. There's not a difference there in levels. It's just happening. It's like uniform, it would represent like conformity. But, and then there's a loosening and then there's a unilevel loosening and disintegration. And that means there's not a hierarchy of values. Your values are not leading you out of your stuckness, or they're not if it's not just a matter of stuckness, because there's many ways that unilevel development can look. And I think it's really important to mention that, one of the things that Michael has contributed to our understanding of the theory is that unilevel development doesn't always have to look like a serious disintegration, that growth actually happens in the unilevel world too. It just looks different, and it doesn't have this hierarchy that multi-level disintegration has. And so you can see in this graphic, there's this disintegration, and then like the sorting part of values is the tricky part because it doesn't always become multi-level. And if it doesn't, you're going to have a very different experience than if it does, because that multi-level shift is opening up the channel out of your suffering or whatever this disintegration looks like. I mean, and when I talk about disintegration, I think about the different ways it's looked for me in the unilevel times of my life. And those are times when I was addicted to drugs or, considering myself mentally ill and looking for answers outside of myself. The multi-level shift and the sorting process that took me out of that was a discovery that I chose to live, and I chose to stop using drugs and looking for ways to escape my life. I mean, that was the third factor in action, because I not only made that decision in my mind, but acted on it and moved out of addiction and out of that life. And so that's, what we see here. And again, like the importance of values in the theory.
So I thought we'd just talk about what might cause that loosening, or was just some examples about what might cause the loosening. And Chris, she might have a bit more to say on this, but any of the things that you can see on the screen can cause wobbles, whether or not it's just there's friction between, what you perceive your values to be and the fact that you're not walking your talk. So maybe you've got some other influence in your life that's, changing your behavior, like peer pressure or something else, or even down to like a crisis which shakes your very beliefs. Any sort of movement there can cause that loosening in your values. Chris, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I just think, again, we could point to what we heard today in other sessions as examples of this. I mean, Eric talked about it. I mean, we heard that again and again. And so, like, just like the different places where it can come from, sometimes, I mean, like the gamut of what disintegration can look like is enormous, from like spiritual awakenings, like you said, or like, other shakeups. Like an example again on Michael Pichowski in his paper on rethinking level 2, talked about this too, that like sometimes if something shakes your foundation and like some authority that you previously trusted, you suddenly recognize is not trustworthy. Well, how great would it happen? How would it be if that happened in America right now? Kind of where I was coming from this morning when I was talking in the opening was like, we're living in a country right now where it's like Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. We're in a tough place right now. And like, where are the values in this country? Because if you don't look at like our political situation right now through a prism of levels, then I guess like that's why we're in the situation we're in. But I also want to say, I feel like it's very important to acknowledge that these graphics and Emma's thinking around this issue come from the fact that she's written a book about this that is about to be edited and hopefully be published. And so, Emma has thought this stuff through. She has created these graphics, and that's what inspired us, I would say, for the most part, to do this, was that she even had the material to just put together. And so it's cool. It's good. It's good. It's going to help people. It's going to help people.
Excuse me while I blush. Yeah, but we had a bit of a thing. I was like, oh, values. Did Dabrowski define them in a particular way? So I had to go fishing through all this stuff to make sure that he didn't. But enough talk, as Homer Simpson would say. Let's chat, more splat. So
Yes.
We're going to move on to now a few exercises. And so when you think about the loosening of values, it's like, well, how the hell do I sort and reshape my values? Like, where do I even begin? And believe me, I have guinea pigged this stuff on myself. So I did get something very tangible and valuable out of it, which was my own set of values. And each of my values has a whole page written about it in my journal. And the trick really is to start at the bottom. So everybody get your pencils or whatever it is that you're using to take notes out, because we're going to do a couple of little exercises and then have some chat moments. So this is the first exercise, and I did this myself, went through and answered these questions. And the trick here is to just answer from your gut and only put 1 or 2 bullet points. Put down the first thing that comes to your mind. So I'll read through the questions. What is the best thing in life? Like, honestly, what is the best thing about being alive for me? What is the thing that I like really appreciate about being a person in the world? And then the second one is, what do I absolutely love in the world? Is it your family or your friends or something that you do or special interests that you have? Think about the what and also the why. Why do I love that thing? And then, what is my greatest achievement so far in life? And don't think about what society wants to deem as success. Think about what's the most meaningful thing to you. What's one thing that you've done with your life that makes you really happy when you think about it and remember it? Then I want you to think about what you'd do with your life if you had all the time, money, and support in the world. You could quit your job tomorrow and just do whatever you wanted with no boundaries. And then number 5 is think about what causes or issues would you speak up about if you knew nobody in the world would judge you. The entire world's listening to you. No one's going to judge you. There will be 0 trolls on the horizon. What is it that you would speak out about and say to the world? And then think about what you'd do with $1 billion. What's the first thing that pops to mind there if I just transferred money into your account right now? And then the last question, question 7, is who influences and inspires me? So, like, who do I really hold in high esteem? And what is it about that person that I really appreciate?
Take a quick pause now and write down some of your answers.
All right. Did everybody get something written down? All right. Now, before we have a quick discussion, I just want you to have a look at the points that you wrote down and see if you can see any patterns. So when I did this, I started to see a pattern around people and helping people, and that started to emerge very strongly for me. So just take a couple of minutes, even if, the qualities or the personality ideal isn't coming out at you real strong yet. Just take a couple of minutes and see from the words that you've written, are there any themes coming up?
Take a quick pause now and write down some of your answers.
And I have to say, Chris, while everybody else is doing this, when I did this, it surprised me. It wasn't what I thought it would be. So when Kate and Tracy were talking about sometimes there's things about yourself that you don't see, sometimes it takes exercises like this to really kind of draw it out for yourself.
It's true. And sometimes even when you see the patterns, it's not enough to help you change it. I mean, even today, I have been picking my cuticles, which is a habit that I do not have in my daily life anymore. But I'm like, oh, here I am with I had to break out a Band-Aid while we were at DU because my finger was bleeding. So
that's when we talk about behaviors not always coming from your self-defined values. Sometimes we go back to habits, and even I'm guilty of going back to trauma responses, habits, mistakes. But I think the more you think about who you want to be, it's a lot easier to sort of navigate it with an inner compass. Does anyone want to chat about what they uncovered?
authentic connectivity, like that, I feel like is what happens at the Congress. And I think the hardest part of trying to translate what's so special about the in-person part of this conference is to help people feel virtually like we're really connected in what we're talking about. And so that's part of why like we wanted to do this, is to like let people feel like they could have an authentic connection, here together. And so, if you yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to talk and like not just type, just like put your hand up and we're happy to let you chat.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, hello from Indiana, 10:35 p.m. here. So glad I stayed up late to enjoy this. Thinking about the authenticity, another word I was using that was alignment. That's something that I'm really striving for, specifically how I answered the question on the other slide of what's the pattern coming up for me is that I really want to achieve, kind of a funny word to use, but joy and peace through alignment. And specifically thinking about that third question, I'm glad Emma made the distinction of not necessarily achievements. The greatest achievement, I would say, is moving toward greater alignment with myself. I just wanted to share that the little name I've come up with for myself for that is acting like I know what I know. And so that's my way of embodying alignment and saying I can know something about myself. I can know that I know it, but I need to act like I know that I know it. And that is a whole different conversation.
I like that.
And this is quite different to like finding out your drivers is quite different to thinking about goals, which is what a lot of the time when we're trying to figure out where we want to go in life is where we start. But a lot of the times the values that we have are actually quite different to what we see as like success and goals and stuff. So did anyone else want to chat? Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I started a book group among some homeschooling families. We've been reading Living with Intensity. And yeah, as I was going through this, it was really interesting that was kind of a common thread. And I think I also saw somebody else have a similar aspect of like, it seemed like bringing people together. Some of the other things that struck out for me was, wanting to create acceptance. So, those deeper values of, wanting to just sort of see people for who they are, where they are, when they're at it, everybody's developing and having that acceptance. So, yeah.
I think it's amazing that you're doing that. I wish that should be like a model for people to have book clubs around living with intensity. You know what I mean? Like that's a great idea. And I'm sure it has been done a lot, but I love that you're building community around this and, that we're connected.
For me, I was always like more the side of like making meaning was like something more important and making connection, like creating opportunity for people to make different kind of connections, seeing different sides through that encounter was something very important thing for me. But in a sense of like the maker, like how like useful maker is like dipping through this, like what I brought was a little bit of surprise for me.
Hello. I feel like what I'm going to say could be a little bit messy, loosening, sorting, but let's hope that it lands somehow and you can maybe add to the pot. But what surprised me in this today was the question number 4 about what would I do with my life if I had all the time, money, support. And I'm no stranger to disintegration and the deep lived process. And what struck me as like something I want to talk about is my knee-jerk response was nothing would change. I keep doing what I'm doing because I live from my values. But the curious thing for me is I think like how uncomfortable it is to be at the edge of that growth. And I think the piece on identity and constantly having to let go of who I thought I was and step into that very courageous place of becoming. And I think part of me, or maybe the younger part of me, thinks, oh, when I'm in attunement with my values, everything just feels blissful and easy because like I'm in line with my values, right? But today I'm sitting here thinking, actually, when I'm really, really on that edge of being pulled into what I know the universe is asking me to do next, it's really actually edgy on so many levels. And you know, I think that came through a little bit in the Congress today too with some of the speakers. Yeah, I don't know if Chris or Emma, you want to speak a little bit about, living the life of values, identity, the reshaping of oneself. And I guess it's just radically uncomfortable to be like not in the slipstream of mainstream life and to be that outlier on the edge, on the frontier.
It's so true.
Yeah, that's what came up for me. So I hope there was something in that.
There definitely is. There is. I mean, like number 5, I think connects to what you're asking, is like when I looked at what causes or issues would I speak about if I knew nobody would judge, I think about how, I just wrote this piece on Substack about being non-binary, and that's something I was pretty afraid to write about openly. And so, I guess that, and again, like, I think part of my feeling of like just discontent with the world right now is knowing that like, I don't have to claim this marginalized identity, but I feel happier being myself. And so it's worth like risking hate by people and stuff to be myself.
I want to say, I think for me, the discomfort is around like a sense of responsibility. Like if I'm a fractal of the universe, I have to show up. I've got to be my unique expression of the universe. And I think ever since quite a young age, I felt that responsibility really heavy on my shoulders. And it's still there. It's like this, it's like it feels like I can't drop the ball. I have to keep moving with the atomic vibration of what's thrown next in front of me and flowing through my body. And the responsibility piece, I think, ties in with the whole values conversation, and it's edgy, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything because I'll probably give away half my keynote. So,
this pattern question, this workshop is super interesting. So I answered all the questions, and then can you see patterns? It's so funny. It's kind of around health, which is like not like helping other people's health, like from that perspective, and very much around gender equality for women, especially. So I like the can you see patterns because if you would have just asked me that yesterday, I would have been like, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur and want to run my own company, blah, blah. But after this exercise, it's super interesting. Yeah, when Tracy and Kate were talking earlier, I was like, I wonder if I read my journal, if I ever would see a pattern, but I didn't have to. Emma had the exercise for us.
That's right.
But so what qualities do you really want to have? I'm 46, and I think it's, for me, just really coming into who I am and having more of a louder voice, or having a louder voice and speaking up when it comes to injustices and stuff like that. So I'm getting there.
Nice.
So thanks for letting me speak and share. Hi, everybody.
People we know.
Yep. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Perfect.
Okay, great. So I came in a little bit late. So if I'm missing a piece of this, please stop me. But I saw the question on the last slide that you had up, Emma, number 7 of the things kind of that inspire you, and then, yeah, what they do, how they behave, and then tying it back to that same pattern. I'm still really new into learning about the theory and really living it, but something that has been coming up in my life a lot recently is this concept of being influenced by people who are really passionate about what they do. It's like this thing that I've kind of journaled about and coined this term of like human excellence, in the sense that when you go to see, a speaker, like listening to the speakers today, or maybe you go to see your favorite band in concert and they're just completely in their element and they are passionate and excited and intelligent and, sharing this information. And I don't know if this is just like a neurodivergent or ADHD thing that I have, but it's like when I feel that energy from them, it's like I want to change my whole life and I want to be an eco psychologist, or, maybe I want to follow and be a biologist, or, study. It could be a vast number of things, but it's something that has been a really huge pattern. Kind of when I look back on my life and all of the changes that I've made, kind of personally and professionally, it's like I really am influenced by other people doing the things that they really love to do. And so it's kind of like an exercise reflecting on myself of, okay, well, what is that thing for me? I really necessarily want to uproot my whole life and become a touring musician? Probably not. But in that moment when I'm feeling that energy, it's like I want to just drop everything and change my whole life. So it's an interesting pattern to notice about myself, which I'm still exploring. But when I came on and saw that, I was like, I know exactly, I know exactly what that is triggering for me. So I just wanted to share because it's very intense feeling, and yeah, something I'm still exploring.
I thought a lot about that one too when I was thinking about these questions, and I think that like to me is emotional overexcitability. Like it really drives me. I need to just feel so invested emotionally in what I do. And so when people inspire me, but then I think the second part of this question, number 7, is really important too. Like, how do these people behave? I mean, if the model you choose is a poorly behaved human, that's not good. But if it's somebody who inspires you and is modeling, great values of their own, then yeah,
Mhm.
like that could be so life changing.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to push on to the next bit now, just in the interest of time, and we can always have a bit more discussion afterwards. Right. So here's where we want to try and take those things that we discovered from our beliefs and our drivers and try and turn them into a value. So if the value is the standard of behavior that we saw in the stack, like have a look at the patterns and see what qualities as a person might come out of that. The step is to take those patterns and have a look at what qualities do I want as a person. So I like to go back to the same analogies. If I'd said, I really love roller coasters. I want to build roller coasters for people. And I found that I had a pattern from my drivers of that I want to bring joy into the world, right? Being about playfulness and other people's happiness, right? That's the pattern that I found. Like out of that, what qualities as a human can I sort of define? So I might sort of say, I need to be a model of joy. Right? I need to be a joyful person, or maybe I need to be an empathetic person so I can care about people and their safety when I do my designs for my roller coasters, right? So take those qualities and then try and turn them into what I call an I can statement. So if we're talking about values defining how we behave, I see this in business all the time. They go, oh, our value is integrity. It's like, well, how do you integrity? Like you can't say I can integrity in a statement. And I saw Simon Sinek cover this. He's like, when you have values, try and make them actionable. So I can't say I can integrity, but I can say I can speak the truth. Right. So have a look in your patterns for qualities and then try and turn them into an I can statement. And maybe just pick one or two. If you noticed a couple of qualities there, even just try and define one, but try and turn it into something actionable. So qualities of person and then something actionable. So I'll give you a couple of examples from my own personal journal. So I want to be a living example of love. I want to do the right thing. I want to speak my truth. So there are all things that I can actually do. So let's have a go at that for a while.
Take a quick pause now and write down some of your answers.
Ooh, good question in the chat. What's the value or purpose in articulating your personality ideal? This is given a bit away from my keynote, but it's probably an important one that I want to call back to anyway to this workshop. But it's about defining your inner compass. Dabrowski talks consistently about figuring out who you ought to be. So by defining that personality ideal, it gives us a direction. So we end up with a hierarchy of values. This is all about defining direction. And he said that one of the higher dynamisms for more developed personalities was being driven by the personality ideal. So that model of what you want it to look like, and then refining that and putting work into it so you can drive towards it. And for me, it's important because, when we talk about the other dynamisms, which are a little bit more uncomfortable, they're not pleasant. You don't want to spend the rest of your life running from the darkness. You want to be heading towards the light instead. So personality ideal, who I really want to be, who I really ought to be, is quite important for not only navigating your way out of disintegration in the first place, but continuing the work on yourself and knowing that you're rowing your boat in the right direction.
Yeah. I mean, I've written about the fact that for me, just one of the parts of getting out of being an addict 25 years ago in October was first imagining in my head that I could stop doing it. Because I was like in a period of my life where I was just like repeating this destructive behavior every day. Part of leaving that was like literally being able to imagine what it would look like to not be that way anymore and then moving in that direction. And so if I realize that not everybody has, mental imagery or imagines like I did. I mean, part of my being an ADHDer is I feel sure of it, the imaginal process that I have. And like, I put it to good use in that sense. But so, yeah, I mean, I think that there's so many ways that being clear about your personality ideal just leads you in the right direction. Okay.
While that's going on, rather than typing out an essay, I'll just respond. We're talking about interesting, think about the lack of control over disintegrations and where you might end up. And it's a balance between mystery and control. And also, too, I think when you do have a bit more of a idea of where you want to go and you have the theory as a tool and you kind of understand it. Chris and I actually had a conversation not too long ago about the fact that you can start to become more adept at handling it, and maybe your disintegration isn't as prolonged or painful. There's nothing to say, nothing will shake your world up ever again. But once you have the tools and you become more competent at using them, you can navigate it a bit more. I don't want to say the word easily, but a bit more adeptly, a bit more practiced.
Welcome.
Yay!
You're on the air, caller.
So, yeah. Calling in live from Los Angeles. My two questions are, and I know these are kind of big, so I'll defer to your judgment in terms of airtime. One is, first of all, when we talk about compass and values and driving the personality ideal, one of the places I go is which self? Because we're multiple. So I have an entire pantheon of selves with different values, different drivers, and some of them drive the bus at some times and some at others. So, and I'm trained in IFS in parts, and that's part of the vocabulary I bring to this. So I think that's a piece that makes the inner compass more complicated that I don't hear get talked about enough, which is one reason I appreciated Eric's take. The second is what about when you're, I kind of agree with some folks that say that the theory of positive disintegration is very individualistic. The fact is that we are a highly social species. We create and co-create meaning and identity in community. We can't get away from that. So while I certainly value my values and I've worked with them for a long time and appreciate the importance of having a compass, what about if your values just don't align with the community? You don't have a way to embody those values. You get thwarted and punished repeatedly for living those. That's been part of my experience as a values-driven person since childhood.
But so for the first part, I would say I totally agree. And like, while I don't like, I'm not an IFS person exactly because that's not something I've studied, but like I have really studied psychosynthesis, and Assagioli's idea of subpersonalities is something that I'm really familiar with, and applied to my own life. And so, but like for me, like the example I gave, it wasn't like a part of me that was smoking crack. Like that was to me just like I was like living this life in my head of being an addict, and like I had to change my mental imagery away from being an addict. And I don't think of that as like going against parts work. I mean, that was like me killing myself. And so my way out of it was to like just get some huge clarity by imagining who I wanted to be. And like, honestly, I mean, I feel like who I am now is who I wanted to be 25 years ago. And so like but I hear you, like we don't talk enough about parts work and the theory of positive disintegration. So I too was so happy to hear Eric talk about that. So that's my answer to part one. And then the second one, I would say absolutely with like the dynamisms. I've talked before about how relational I think this is. And like my other favorite theory is relational cultural theory. So completely agree. And we need to find a way to talk less about it as so individualistic and much more about how much community matters. And especially when we don't have it. And we've talked about, like trauma and oppression being parts of our story, and, issues of class and privilege really matter. And so agreed. Totally. Emma, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Honestly, living your values is sometimes a very hard balancing act, because we want to talk about it's not in a bubble. It's about how you relate to other people. And I think it was in that kitten video that I did. Oh God, where I sort of said it's not like sometimes your behaviors aren't just like a snap decision based on one value. You have to take into account multiple values. So I use the example of like speaking your truth, right? So you can come out, someone says something to you, and you just go, I'm going to drop truth bombs, right? And you just go and blunt force it out. But are you really balancing that with maybe some of your other values, like being empathetic and compassionate to the other person and valuing the relationship? So I've always sort of said your actions, you got to try and align them with all your values, which is hard. It's freaking hard. That's why this stuff is, as Dabrowski said, hard won. And you're not going to get it right all the time. It's not as easy as just go, 1-to-1 match. I think there's complexity in that. And it's something that you try and apply to different situations as they come up too. So it's this continual sort of reflection and improvement exercise, I think, and not just thinking about, well, I got one value. Sometimes you've got to compromise, and that in itself feels uncomfortable. And like, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but that's my experience of it, that I have to take a step back and go, okay, what are all my values that are playing into this situation? Because it can't just be speaking the truth. That's not always the way. Sometimes that conflicts with living with love or being compassionate. So
yeah, I really appreciate both of your thoughts, and amen to what you just said too, Emma. Like, one of my highest values is integrity, and another high one is kindness or compassion, and those two often conflict. So yeah, thank you for surfacing that.
And it's not easy, straightforward, and we're not always going to get it right.
Totally.
Before I invite people to share if they've been able to come up with an I can statement, I just want to do a quick pulse check, because this is something I stumbled on. If you are able to come up with some value statements, we talk about relationships. I just want you to think about, are those values all towards others, or have you factored yourself into that picture? Because Chris knows I did a apartment value profile test once, and I broke the tool because I had very high levels of empathy for other people, but I had the crappiest self-esteem known to humankind, which was a big revelation for me. So I'd given a lot of thought about how I wanted to treat other people, but I'd never given any thought about how I should actually treat myself in that equation too. So just take a second to have a look, because sometimes we do treat ourselves a little differently, especially if we're prone to beating ourselves up or being a little bit harsh with our inner critic.
Take a quick pause now and write down some of your answers.
And with that thought, I might throw the floor open again.
You asked the question about, is it about yourself? And it's all about myself, but for helping others. Like, I want to model better for my children, to let them see that being yourself, authentically self, is the best. And I can make a difference to people personally and in my work by living my truth and not worrying about others. So it's all about me, but all about helping others. And I was thinking, can this be I can give my traumas a space in my life and body where they can be, but not hold me back anymore. Because that's something I'm experiencing in the development, and I'm experiencing going back and forth in the development because they are holding me back still.
Thanks so much for joining us so early in the morning, and being able to articulate your thoughts so well. Like, I have to say, if it was me at 5 a.m. But yes, thank you so much for sharing that.
I really want to be with this part. So I'm up. It started at 9:30 in the evening. So I'm going to sleep after this. I don't have to work tomorrow. So
nice, thankfully.
Yep.
Yeah, this is, I think, really rich. I've been thinking a lot recently about whether I speak from the center of myself or whether I'm speaking from other people. And I guess falling into old habits of fawning or people pleasing. And I think what has become, well, really my life work, if I'm honest, but this idea of really honoring the truth of what my neurology is telling me, and actually my body tells me when to speak up. And if I'm aware that that will be difficult or confronting or challenging for the listener, I've had to learn how to speak from my vulnerability and be really sensitive to how it's received, but to also open up curiosity for how it's landing for them, so it can become a two-way, reciprocated, healing, open conversation. So it's honoring the truth of what I'm sensing and feeling, but also allowing space for the outer world to also let me know what they're sensing and feeling. And it's come up a little bit just in my world. Like, I was talking to a young guy, super existential, very excitables, all of that. And he's dating. And, he was just really ruminating, like couldn't sleep, highly anxious about this new girl he was dating and unsure about. And I feel like these are the kind of day-to-day examples where I sort of said to him, your body is losing sleep over this. Like, your neurology is telling you this is important to you, and it's important that you speak up and advocate for yourself, that there's information you need to sleep at night. And it's totally okay that you have that conversation with this girl, and it can be done in a really gentle, friendly, compassionate way. And I think shifting that narrative around it's okay to listen to the body and speak up is like where I would like to see the world headed. And that, honoring of all of our differences. That another example was a sporting movie made locally, and one of my friends who's gay just said, like, women were completely overlooked in the entire movie, and it was just, she was infuriated, and it was just everything about it felt so wrong, but she didn't want to hurt his feelings and da-da-da-da-da. And I was having a chat with her, and I said a really similar thing. I was like, it's really important for you. Like, this is this is affecting your body, I can tell. And she's like, yeah. I'm like, if we're all here with our own neurodiversity and our own way of seeing and feeling the world, how is that movie maker ever going to know that he may have totally accidentally overlooked an entire gender if no one tells him because they're worried about hurting his feelings and they were good friends? And anyway, so she went and had the uncomfortable conversation of, you know, about how she felt about the movie and the lack of female representation. And I think they're rich places for us all to grow collectively, I think and it's not easy. Like they're vulnerable conversations. And I think there's a whole skill set for us to work on as a community, maybe a workshop.
That would be a great one.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I mean, we heard about that today too, just like tuning into like what your body is telling you is just so critical. I mean, if you're disconnected from it, it's the source of so much heartache and hardship.
She really appreciates about TPD is a space for all our different value sets, personality ideals, stories, and ways of being to coexist. Just because one of us wants to take better care of others doesn't mean the person who needs to take better care of himself is wrong. And we're all on our own journeys that are vastly different. At the same time, we find common ground and shared language in the theory, how meaningful to be held and free in our similarities and our differences. Oh, yeah.
Yes, love that. It's so true that once we have this once we have the language for what's happening, wow.
So this is the bit where I actually had to work a little bit because I had a very clear idea of what my value statements were. Working in business for a while, it was quite easy to articulate them, but putting them into practice, slightly harder. And this is where you start feeding into your autopsychotherapy. So just take a couple of minutes to have a look and write down any thoughts about how you might start to activate some of this stuff in your life. So have a think about where you are now, like your point A, and how does it compare to your personality ideal or the values you have sort of jotted down now, which should be your point B. And maybe think of one thing to stop doing, to start doing, and to keep doing if you're already doing it well. So for me, I had a lot of shitty behaviors I had to stop doing, and then that meant I had new behaviors that I had to start employing. And it's also a good time to think about, well, how am I going to monitor that or go to for support? So, you know, am I going to journal? Am I going to have regular check-ins for myself? So this is where it starts getting a little bit more practical of, you know, what are we going to do in the day-to-day? So I'll just give you a couple of minutes.
Take a quick pause now and write down some of your answers.
Just Chris and I talked about some will exercises, and this isn't maybe specifically moving towards new behaviors, so like your stop, start, and keep. This is more just general exercises. It's like if you are playing basketball, you know, going to the gym isn't developing your dribbling specifically or your shooting, but it is making you fitter. And these are just some examples of some things you can do in general. So when you're coming from that place of, oh, my behaviors aren't coming from my self-defined values, these are just sort of general things that can sort of stop that sort of drive to compulsive or learned behaviors. And things like the one I thought was very interesting was doing something extremely slowly. So rather than that compulsion or rush, to just do it really slow. And obviously saying no when it's easier to say yes, but we know we should say no. You know, holding your tongue, that was refrain from saying something you're tempted to say. That was one I had to learn. Or, you know, committing to doing something like journaling every day for 1 month. So that's practice at building a new habit of sorts. So if you identify things you need to start doing a lot, then, you know, habit forming's maybe a routine you might need to get into.
But that last one, journal every day for a month, that's one of the things that I did when I was like 23 and just went on disability for mental illness. I just was in this terrible place. And one of the like small goals I set for myself that I could actually do was like writing every day. And it's so interesting to me to look at that time of my life because you can tell that's just like forcing myself to do this one thing every day, like really made a bit of a difference in my mental state. So, I mean, these activities are interesting because they do help you, like she said, break out of habits or compulsions or other issues, or they can help. But that's the behavior part, like the action part. When you think about like your values driving you and helping move you in a new direction, it's not just the thinking about them, it's the action part and the behavior, and that's often the hard part.
Mm. Yeah, it's really trying to figure out like what's the most effective way to get from that point A to that point B, and sometimes that is like sort of breaking compulsions and figuring out new ways to behave. But the behavior part's really the sticky part, honestly.
It is. I like writing poems too. So many of the toughest times of my life, there's poems because it was like the only thing I could do.
Yeah, recording it, because it's not just for, maybe it's easier for you to do rather than writing, but like I think as an accessibility exercise, I talk about writing stuff down because I'm a writing person, but yeah, definitely like doing voice recordings is also a completely valid way to do this. Talk to text, even videoing yourself, like, which is hard to watch sometimes, but you can actually get a lot from seeing your own emotions and facial expressions as well as you're doing this. So, and someone writes in Urdu and then translates it to English in ChatGPT. That's valid. That is completely valid.
Well, I mean, and the question you had that was like, what would you do if you had like the money or whatever, But yeah, I mean, I do feel like I would do what I do now, but I would do it like at a bigger scale, like somebody with money,
Yeah.
like I would have somebody as like my assistant. That would be amazing. That would be a dream. So, but no, thank you all for being here.
I would definitely quit work and do nothing but podcasting for sure. And particularly when I know it makes people laugh and cry. That's like so good.
It's amazing. Well, we appreciate everyone. I mean, this really drives us to know that it matters to people. So thank you. And yes, your homework.
Yeah. So don't forget, this doesn't stop today. Take your values home, keep fleshing your stuff out. And if I could give you one hint, like my journal with my values, I can't tell you how many times I have literally gone back and reread them and learnt them until I don't have to carry my journal around with me. Like they are stuck in my head, because that's really the one way that you are going to end up putting this out in the world.
Thank you all for being here. This has been an amazing first day. So thanks for being here with us. Like it's amazing. It's already exceeded my expectations. So thanks.
Continue your path to authenticity through the links in the show notes. Subscribe to our Substack newsletter for stacks of cool things delivered straight to your inbox. Explore the Dabrowski Centre, email us, or join us on social media. And don't forget to show your love by liking, subscribing, grabbing some positive Disintegration merch, or leaving us a rating or review on your podcast platform.